Welcome back to the Saturday Scholars College Football Podcast. That is Xan. I am Shoob, and today we are here to do our 12-team playoff predictions. This is official. You can stamp it in. Xan and Shoob, we are here to do our predictions. Xan, this was a little bit tougher than it initially looked, and I'm ready to get into this, man. I'm kind of excited.
Whew, man, I really had to sit here, man, especially with going for the at-larges, and it was tough. I completely agree with you, especially picking conference champions since that's such a big deal in the new format. So yeah, man, let's jump right into it. I'm really curious to see what we both have.
Yes, let's dive in. So let's follow principle here. First, we must make sure that we have our top five conference champions seeded correctly. Of course, the top four conference champions will be the top four seeds and get the buys. And then we have one other conference champion, likely the G5, that will fall in as the 12 seed. So, Xan, who are your top five conference champions? Let's start there.
So at the one seed, and I have to just be consistent based upon what I picked in our conference championship video. I'm going to go with the Georgia Bulldogs. Even with two losses, I think Georgia Bulldogs will probably end up being the one seed because I think there's a lot of teams this year. There's a lot more variance to where, like, I think almost everybody's going to end up with at least one or two losses. So by nature of that prediction, I'm going to go with Georgia Bulldogs as the number one seed and the bye week as the SEC champion. Then I'm going to go with the Oregon Ducks as the two seed, as the Big Ten champion. You can look at our previous video. This is all just staying consistent with our conference championship predictions. And so I'm kind of basing it upon that. And with that being said, the three seed, I have Kansas State Wildcats. Will they be ranked number three at the end of the year? No, but the format doesn't require them to be the number three ranked team to be the number three seed, just the third highest conference champion. And so with that being said, I'm going Kansas State at number three because I did predict them to win the Big 12, which means number four, Shoob, you know who it's probably going to be because we just did the conference championship predictions. It's going to be the NC State Wolfpack.
The
And
pack.
The NC State Wolfpack, I got predicted, they'll probably be ranked like maybe 15 or 15 to 10 range, but they're going to be the four seed based on the new format. And so now we go to the at-larges. The at-large is kind of where this playoff gets a little bit interesting and produces some pretty cool matchups. So obviously for my highest ranked at-large, I'm going to go with the Ohio State Buckeyes. I think they're going to be, if they're not going to win their league, they're at least going to be the best team that did not win their league. So I have them there at the five seed, which honestly is probably be a very favorable position for them if they have to play a team in the first round. Then the six seed, I'm going to go ahead and have the Notre Dame Fighting Irish because I think they have the benefit of probably maybe a two-loss season, but also not being in the conference. So I think they have that working in their favor to help them kind of just slide into this playoff, considering that there's so many at-larges. And then seven, I'm going to go with the SEC runner-up, Texas, which was my prediction. And then again, if you, I'm going with consistency. Check out our conference championship predictions video. If you're kind of curious as to why some of these are seeded a certain way, I'm just going with consistency based upon that prediction. And then eight, I've got the Ole Miss Rebels. The Ole Miss Rebels, I think, are going to just barely miss the conference championship game, and they're going to be a rung up there with a very high ranking, and they will be in the playoff. They're a very quality team, and they will play the nine seed, the Penn State and Nittany Lions. I think Drew Aller is, going to take a little bit of a step forward this year. Penn State has some good scheduling dynamics relative to some of the other top teams in their league, and I think that bodes well for them to get into this playoff. But I believe there could be another team in the Big Ten on the horizon, and that's the Michigan Wolverines at 10. Yes, I do think they're going to take a step back this year. They're not going to be quite what they were. I could see them being a two, maybe even a three-loss team, but ultimately they started the season ranked, and ultimately I think when I look at some of the other teams that are going to be contention here, I think a few other teams are going to end up with, two, three, four losses, which is ultimately going to push Michigan up a little bit and give them the chance at this at-large because some of these other leagues are very quality and they're going to beat up on each other, and some of the top-end teams are going to knock out some of these middle-end teams. So I think it's actually a perfect sweet spot for Michigan, even though they're probably going to be a rung below what they were last year. It's a perfect spot for Michigan to sneak in. So I've got Michigan at 10. Then 11, I got the Alabama Crimson Tide. And I think this could be a very much a three-loss Alabama Crimson Tide slating here at 11. I think they're going to be pretty quality under Kalen DeBoer. I mean, he's a born winner. I mean, just look at his head coaching record. We talk about it every time that we talk about Kalen DeBoer just because it's so impressive and it's pure video game numbers. And it feels like a sin to keep Alabama out of this, but this was very difficult because there are so many teams in the SEC that I feel you could make a strong argument with slate in here and be in here. So it wouldn't be wrong either way or another. So SEC fans, if you don't see your name pop in here, don't be too disappointed. It's really just kind of like flip a coin, roll a dice over who's going to kind of slate into these last few spots. Because I mean, truly, I mean, ever since adding OU, Texas, and then the league itself is improving from a talent perspective, it makes it very hard to pick. But I had to make a decision, so I went with the born winner, Kalen DeBoer. Then 12, you've got your at-large Liberty, a conference champion who basically, well, not at large, they're conference champion, and they're going to be G5. They have good scheduling dynamics. They're probably one of the more talented teams in the G5. I think it favors them very well. They play in a relatively easy conference. I think Liberty, and they also have a great coach. So I think Liberty is going to be there. So when we look at teams that just barely missed, I'm going to go number 13, the Missouri Tigers. Just barely missed.
They're going to be right on the edge, aren't they?
They are, and you can make an argument that it would be Missouri in place of Alabama. You could swap those teams, but I really do like the Missouri Tigers. But I was looking at this, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe Missouri plays Alabama this year.
Right.
And I have Alabama winning that game head to head, and that's the only reason I have them in over Missouri. Um,
The playoff before the playoff right there.
Basically, yeah, man, it's crazy, but that's gonna be costly to Missouri. I think basically the winner of that game is going to slate into this playoff later on. Whoever wins the Alabama Missouri game, that's a very crucial game. 14, I actually have a surprising team, and I'm doing it as a runner up, and I'm actually gonna go a little bit homer mode here and go with the Oklahoma State Cowboys at 14, just barely missing. And then another team that I'm really high on, and Shoob, I know you're high on as well, based upon the conference championship predictions. I'm going to go with a narrow miss being Virginia Tech over there at 15.
I like it. So Missouri, Oklahoma State, Virginia Tech just missing. Two of those teams would have lost their conference championship game in your scenario, which that's
Yep.
going to be something interesting to look out for. But I'm just looking at this first round matchups. You got Liberty going to the Shoe, Penn State going at Ole Miss, Alabama at Notre Dame. Man, the TV execs would love that one. And then, I mean,
That's
they would
exactly
also
why they
love
expanded
Michigan
it,
and
man.
Texas.
That's
This
exactly why
is
it got
exactly
expanded.
exactly. And how about Michigan, Texas? So in your scenario, you know what's funny is that week 2, Texas goes at Michigan, and then in this scenario, in the playoff, they basically flip the home site, and Michigan would go
Yep.
play at Texas. So that would be a rematch in Austin. So that'd be pretty interesting. All right, San, let's fill out the bracket here. Who wins these
That's
games?
well, obviously the first one's not going to be a contest. Ohio State's going to steamroll Liberty.
Oh
Um,
man,
And
I'm
that's why I said, like even though like if they don't, and even if it's Oregon and you flip the two, whoever gets that Liberty game is going to steamroll that person and they're going to be off to the next round. Um, I mean, cool, awesome to get the G5 involved, but ultimately they're not going to be competitive enough to, get past the first round in 99% of years. But anyway, 9-8 game. Penn State at Ole Miss. I like Ole Miss to win this game. Ole Miss is at home. I think they're a little more well-rounded than Penn State. And James Franklin has a abysmal record in ranked matchups. Honestly, like probably one of the worst that I've seen in a really, really long time. So I really like Ole Miss to win this game. I like Lane Kiffin. Ole Miss advances to play the Dogs. And Alabama at Notre Dame. I like Alabama to win this game. Notre Dame, no disrespect to Notre Dame, but they just are a perennial, like, they just don't win big games. They always get themselves into these situations, always put themselves into big games, but they haven't won one of these major New Year's games or playoff now in a very, very long time. And I don't think that changes when you play a born winner like Kalen DeBoer and an experienced quarterback like Jalen Milroe. I think they lose that game. Then Michigan and Texas. I think Texas is a rung above Michigan, and it's in Austin. I think Texas beats Michigan. and we move on to our semifinals and our
Quarterfinals.
prestigious or quarterfinals and our prestigious bowl games. I've got Ohio State beating NC State. I mean, they're just a rung above the Wolfpack. I love the Wolfpack this year, but I mean, Ohio State's roster talent is just completely like insane. And this is actually a great path for Ohio State. I think you'd rather play the Wolfpack than play Texas if it was flipped and you were the conference champion.
That's going to be a
So it could
common theme is the 5 seed every year is probably going to be a team that gets a good path to the semifinals.
exactly. And Ohio State happens to be the team there. Um, And now we got Ole Miss and Georgia. Oof, I really like that game. That's going to be a battle, man. You know, Lane Kiffin's going to want that. But I'm going to go with Georgia. It's really hard to bet against the dogs, but I really like what Lane Kiffin's doing with this team, but it's not going to be enough to beat the dogs. All right. Alabama, Kansas State. We've already seen this happen. Alabama's going to win this game. They're just a rung above Kansas State. I mean, the last time that these two played it was it last year or the year before? They
It's 2 years
absolutely
ago.
demolished. Yeah, they absolutely demolished Kansas State, and this was like pretty good Kansas State team that year. So I think Alabama's going to win, and then we've got Texas at Oregon. That's going to be a tough game, but you
This
know
might be the
what?
most competitive of your quarterfinals for sure.
Oh, absolutely, this is going to be the most competitive game. And you know what? I say a hard fought battle. They're celebrating in Austin. The Oregon Ducks move on.
I like it. All right. So we have Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama, and Oregon. Nice representation of two Big Ten, two SEC teams here, and they're both playing each other. So what do we got?
You know, this is really tough, man. Right here, this is where we get into kind of coin flippy territory. But I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna say Ohio State gets Georgia. I'm gonna say
Hmm.
Ohio State beats them. They finally get Ryan Day finally gets this hump over off his back. He doesn't have to get through Michigan to make the playoff anymore, or like you don't have to win your conference. All these things. I mean, I think that bodes really well for Ryan Day. And the biggest thing for me is I think they just have a great roster this year, Shoob. Like on paper, it's really kind of them in Georgia, and I think the winner of them in Georgia is in a great spot to win the national title. And with that being said, on the other side of the coin here, I'm actually going to have a Big Ten championship game rematch
Oh,
in the national championship. Oregon taking out Alabama, um, and yeah,
wow. So just like last year, well, technically they weren't in the league yet, but last year Washington and Michigan was a future All Big Ten national championship. You got Ohio State versus Oregon, which is a current All Big Ten national championship,
hmm
and in your scenario, this would be the third time that these two teams play each other because they got the regular season. You had them playing in the conference championship, which you have Oregon winning, and now you have them playing in the national championship.
and it's going to be a bloodbath. And I think I told myself this: whoever wins the regular season matchup will lose the rematch. And so by that, I say Ryan Day finally gets the monkey off his back, and the Ohio State Buckeyes are the champions.
Wow, Ohio State winning the national championship there. So
Favorable path, man. Other than having to get Georgia in the semis, I think they have a very favorable path.
that is true. Yeah, if you look at their first two opponents as the 5 seed, definitely a bit of a cakewalk to the semifinals if you look at it that way. Yeah, man, interesting. So Ryan Day gets the monkey off his back. You have an all Big Ten championship game. 3 times Georgia and Ohio State and Oregon play each other. Very interesting. All right. Well, my playoff predictions. So we shall start with my first conference champions. So in the same process as you. So my number one team and my top conference champion will be the aforementioned Ohio State Buckeyes. I like Ohio State. I think they will win the Big Ten championship. And I think by virtue of their schedule, they will be number one over my second highest conference champion, which is Georgia. And that is simply because I don't know if Georgia is necessarily worse than Ohio State. I think Georgia may be a little bit better than Ohio State, but Georgia's got a tougher schedule, and I think Georgia's more likely to have an extra loss or two. So that's why I have Ohio State 1, Georgia 2. My number 3 will be my ACC conference champion, which is the Virginia Tech Hokies. I'm very high on Virginia Tech this year, like what they are brewing up there in Blacksburg. Kyron Drones, I expect big things from him at quarterback. And my fourth highest conference champion, i.e., my Big 12 champion, is the Iowa State Cyclones. If you want our deep dive rationale into why we have our conference champions the way we do, check out our conference championship prediction. But I really like my odds here, Virginia Tech and Iowa State as dark horse teams to win their respective leagues, and go watch our conference championship prediction video for that synopsis. And my fifth highest conference champion, i.e., the group highest rated group of five champ that will go into my 12 seed, is the Boise State Broncos. Looking at the at-larges here, my number 5 seed, first at-large off the board, is the Ole Miss Rebels. They are my SEC championship runner-ups. I like Ole Miss a lot this year, favorable schedule, and I think the committee will think highly of them, especially with the amount of teams in their league that are pretty good at the top. Number 6, I have the Oregon Ducks, my Big Ten championship runner-up. I like Oregon as the number 6 seed there behind Ole Miss, which is pretty tough there. I like Oregon and Ole Miss as the 5 and 6. And then I think you go a little bit below in terms of resume. You got Texas down there at number 7. I don't have Texas making the SEC championship, but I do think that they will finish around 10 and 2 and will still have enough on their resume to make the playoff. At number 8 is the Penn State Nittany Lions. Similar situation as the Longhorns. I think Penn State will finish with a 10 and 2 record. Will not make the Big Ten championship game, but will have a decent enough resume to finally get into the playoff. At number 9 is Alabama. Alabama, I think, is a perfect at-large spot here. I didn't have them in my SEC championship game, but again, they're going to have that beef on their resume. I like them to finish 10 and 2, maybe 9 and 3, and still get in here. At number 10 is Notre Dame. Notre Dame, I think, has a pretty favorable schedule. They only really have 2 games that they really need to win, and I believe that is at Texas A&M in week 1 and then Florida State. Even if they lose to A&M in week 1, I think if they run the table, this could be an 11-1 team that gets in as an at-large. I'm liking Notre Dame here, barely squeaking in. And then my number 11 is Miami. Now, this is where I felt pretty shaky. Notre Dame and Miami with these two last at-larges. Miami I have as my ACC championship runner-up. I don't like trusting Mario Cristobal to run the table enough to get into this playoff, but I think that Miami has the upside to go 10 and 2 and get to the ACC championship game with Cam Ward. And I just think that the ACC at the top will be pretty competitive this year, but Miami, I think, is just as good, if not better, than Florida State, Clemson, and the other teams. And I think that they will sneak in with just good enough of a resume and the right head-to-head wins. And then, of course, Boise State is my number 12. I really like Boise State this year, actually, in the Mountain West, which I think is a little bit down compared to normal years. And I like Boise State actually as a big favorite to win the Mountain West. And they have sort of a tougher schedule. They do play Oregon in the regular season, which they're probably going to lose that game, but I don't know if that'll be held against them. But they've got to go at UNLV, which is a better team in the Mountain West. And they also play Oregon State and Washington State, the Pac-2. And I think there's a good chance Boise State beats Oregon State, Washington State. The committee is going to like that. And that's why I think Boise State, by virtue of their resume, could probably be the highest rated group of 5 champ.
Good rationale.
So my just missed would be Michigan. I think Michigan, their offense is just kind of lacking for me. I don't expect it to be very good. The defense will carry this team, but I don't think there'll be enough beef on Michigan's resume to make the playoff. I think they'll be one of the first teams out. They're going to go, I think, 9 and 3, not have those big wins against the Penn States and Ohio States. So they barely miss. Utah as my Big 12 runner-up. I think Utah will have a pretty good record here. Like, this could be a 10 and 3 team or maybe an 11 and 2 team that I have losing the Big 12 championship, but not getting in because of just strength of schedule with the Big 12. And I don't know if the committee will value that as high as teams like Alabama and Texas and Penn State coming in as at large. So that's where you kind of see that coming into play. And then my 15 is Texas A&M. I really do think Texas A&M, they're a team that I considered getting in as an at large.
Same.
But they do have sort of a tougher schedule, but I do think they can make some noise, and I wouldn't be surprised if A&M has a breakout year with Elko in year 1 and makes this thing, but I have them just missing. So now filling out the bracket, starting at the top here in the first round, Boise State heading to Oxford. Got to give me Ole Miss here. Ole Miss just simply a better team than Boise State. Maddox
I'd be shocked
Madsen,
if 12 ever beats the 5, man.
yeah, same. as long as it's the G5 champ, but you never know. And then my next game, I have Alabama going to Penn State. You think they would make this a night game, a whiteout game in this would be what, in late December at Penn
Ooh, a second
State.
wideout game? That would be nice, man.
Bama coming in for a whiteout game in a playoff. Ooh, man, this would be amazing. But yeah, I think Alabama's a better team. And, head coaching disparity here. Kalen DeBoer versus James Franklin. I'm going to trust Kalen DeBoer, even though it's in a hostile environment. Miami and Oregon. Now, if this played out this way, this would be Mario Cristobal going against his former team that he left. He left Oregon to come to Miami. This would be pretty interesting for the storylines, but again, head coaching disparity here. Dan Lanning with the home field advantage in Autzen. I don't think Miami gets him there. Oregon moves on. And then Notre Dame at Texas. Again, the TV execs are just foaming out of the mouth at these matchups here for the ratings. But Texas in Austin against Notre Dame. Texas moves on. I just think they're simply the better team.
That path for Texas is tough, man.
It is very tough. And again, the seeding is going to play a huge part in this. A lot of these teams' fates will be just sheerly determined by their seed that they get and the draw and the path that's in their way here in this 12-team playoff format. Iowa State versus Ole Miss. Now, I actually think this could be competitive, and I think Iowa State would have a decent shot here. But I think Ole Miss just has the overall better talent. But I do not think this would be a blowout by any means. I think Iowa State loses competitively to Ole Miss, who moves on. Alabama versus Ohio State. Oh boy. Ohio State would be pretty pissed off, I think, if they had to run into Kalen DeBoer in Alabama as their first game as the 1 seed. Doesn't really seem like they're getting rewarded for being the 1 seed in this format. But again, this format is it's pretty lopsided the way the seeds work. So I don't know if necessarily being a higher seed is better for you. You might be better off with some lower seeds the way this thing's going to play out. But I do have Ohio State winning, and this is something you don't get to say very often, but I do think Ohio State is a better roster than Alabama. And especially coming off of a bye, I like Ohio State to move on. Virginia Tech and Oregon. I really do think Virginia Tech has a legit shot to win here. It's at a neutral site, so it's not with Enter Sandman playing and Blacksburg, but I got to have Oregon moving on. But I do see this one being competitive. Oregon is pretty good, and they got an experienced quarterback in Dylan Gabriel. So I like Oregon. And then Texas and Georgia, this would be a regular season rematch, and I think Georgia gets them here. Maybe Texas is the one team that beats Georgia in the regular season, but I like Georgia to advance here, especially with that rest. I like Georgia a lot here to move on. So now I, like you, have two
This looks pretty
SEC.
familiar.
Yeah, two SEC, two Big Ten. I think we have three of the same four, right?
Yep.
Ohio State versus Ole Miss. I got to have Ohio State moving on. I like Ohio State a lot. Again, I think you can make the argument they're the best roster in the country. So I like Ohio State over Ole Miss. Ryan Day continues to break the narrative there that he can't win the big games. And then Georgia versus Oregon. This would be a great matchup, but I think at this point in time, Georgia with one less game to play, and I think they're just a little bit better than Oregon. Remember a couple of years ago, Dan Lanning's first game, they played Georgia, and Georgia ran them out of the building. I do think that Georgia will have an edge here, even though this would be Dan Lanning versus his former employer in Kirby Smart. So the storylines here would just be amazing. Now I have Ohio State versus Georgia for the national championship, which I think is kind of chalky, but you know what? I do truly believe that these teams will be the teams that have enough depth to withstand a grueling playoff, and this will be the national championship. And Xan, I am going to tell you here with my national champion, I got the Ohio State Buckeyes and Ryan Day getting over the hump, breaking all the narratives that he can't win the big one, and Ohio State wins the national championship, which should be something else considering that they do it the year after their arch rival Michigan wins the national championship. I think this is going to turn into a little Alabama-Auburn. Remember back in the early 2010s when Alabama and Auburn were trading national championships as arch rivals? I see that happening here. I think Ryan Day is a lot better of a coach than people are giving him credit for, and I think that this narrative will be broken and they defeat Kirby Smart and Georgia in the national championship game, which would be pretty epic. So there you have it.
I like it.
This was harder than it looks.
It's very hard.
We encourage you, if you're a fan and if you're a diehard football fan, go ahead and fill this out yourself. It is some of these are easy, but some of these picks, especially those at large teams, are tough. You really got to look at their schedules to fill this out.